This episode of Around the Oval is brought to you by Todd Pennington with Renovation Mortgage. Hey, Ohio State fans, Alex Gleitman here, back with another edition of Around the Oval, brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. We're gonna change things up a little bit this week. I shouldn't say no special guest. It's definitely a special guest, but no recruits, no analysts, no draft experts, things like that. Former players. We're keeping it in house. We got the Godfather of Buckeye Scoop, Marc Givler, in the house. We're going to be talking a little bit about, who our top picks at each position are for the biggest Ohio State recruiting wins of all time. I did, in my A-Deck feature on Buckeye Scoop for subscribers the last couple of weeks, I featured offensive players first, then defense and athletes as they're categorized in the second part. And what we basically, the criteria here is opinion. You could go rankings, you could go kind of the hype around the player, you could go what it meant for Ohio State maybe at the time, but it has nothing to do with how they actually did at Ohio State. It's just players who signed with Ohio State and just how big of a recruiting win that was for them, at the time. So just throwing this name out there, someone like Justin Zwick, who will be a candidate at quarterback, was a highly ranked kid early in the Tressel tenure, was a big get from the state of Ohio, had offers from around the country. He didn't really end up doing much during his time at Ohio State. Troy Smith obviously did from that class, but Justin Zwick was a bigger recruiting get than Troy Smith at that point in time. So that's kind of the criteria we're going to be doing, nothing to do with the NFL or college. And so, Mark, I'm going to kick it over to you. We're going to start with the quarterback position. Who is your biggest Ohio State recruiting win at quarterback in the last, and we're going last 20 years. So 2002 through 2021, the class that was just signed.
Yeah, I'll take the low hanging fruit here. Terrell Pryor, number one player in the country, which I believe Ohio State did not replicate until Quinn Ewers, although I believe ESPN did have Fleming one, but kind of like the last time they've had kind of a consensus number one overall. So obviously the delay in the recruiting process, the drama, and I know this wasn't maybe really supposed to be part of the criteria, but I feel like I have to mention maybe the all-time, think of all the great players Ohio State's recruited over the years. And I think Pryor might have been the most important because I don't know what on earth that quarterback room would have looked like for 2 or 3 years there if they had whiffed on Terrell Pryor. That could have been disastrous.
Yeah, that would have been interesting. I mean, I don't know, but I got to go Pryor too. I'll give my number 2 was Braxton Miller, just because you kind of knew what he was going to be at Ohio State. And to your point, I mean, if they didn't have Braxton Miller in that 2011 season, we might have had to watch Joe Bowserman go 3-9 that year. So I think quarterback was an easy one. Let's move on to running back. I'll start and then kick it over to you. This was a tough one for me. I was down to 2 Ohio guys, and I just went Beanie Wells. I'm not going to give the other guy because that might be your choice. I don't know. I'll say it after, but I just think Beanie Wells was so big for the program. They went through like a run of like Liddell Ross and a couple other guys. Antonio Pittman was good. I thought he was underrated actually while he was at Ohio State, but he wasn't like an elite back that, maybe you were used to when you talked about the Eddie Georges, the Archie Griffins, the Keith Byers of the world and guys like that. So I think that, from Maurice Clarett till at least Beanie Wells, they didn't have that truly elite back, and you saw the impact he made in year 1. And then obviously went on to have 2 sensational years before becoming a first-round pick. Not that that mattered for this criteria. He was a 5-star from Ohio, Army All-American, like I forget what he was, top 10 player in the country, something along those lines. So I'm going Beanie Wells. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, I'm going Clarett. I don't know that there's a wrong answer here. I think there's several guys you could probably talk about depending on how you want to play the game and with the criteria. But Clarett was another high school All-American, 5-star guy. Beanie might have been a little more higher rated, or at least more consistently higher rated. I think there was maybe a little more of a dissenting opinions or whatever on Clarett, but he was obviously extremely highly rated. And quite frankly, came at a time when Ohio State was not exactly, crushing it in recruiting. I mean, that was such a big thing. Jim Tressel being able to snag that and hold on there. And I think that was such an important, we're talking about a turning point, maybe the turning point in Ohio State football history, the Cooper Tressel transition. I mean, that has anything been more important in the last, 50 years in Ohio State football than getting that next guy right after Cooper? I mean, so I think Claret's the guy there. And then of course we can talk about the championship and everything else, but I think that's the guy. I will say this though, a guy who he made your honorable mention. And I think actually, if we actually just really focus at it through the lens of hype and like hoopla and everything else, Mike Weber. I mean, the circus around him, meeting with Harbaugh. I mean, they're trying to stall that momentum. Is he gonna decommit? Is he, what's gonna happen? The Detroit guy who, people will joke with me, he's never, he's never left the city of Detroit in his life. He's gonna go to Ohio State. Army All-American, top 100 player. I think he's a guy who probably people wouldn't put on this list, but maybe should be on there.
Yeah, for sure. And I would also add Travion Henderson. Obviously, what he potentially could be this year, we don't know. So we can't tell if he's going to be a bust or a success or whatever. So just the hype he's had and getting him without stepping a foot on campus last year was just incredible to me. So I agree. Mike Weber definitely should get more consideration. Let's go to receiver. Who's your guy at receiver?
Yeah, I mean it's Ted Ginn Jr. Electric like Army Bowl performance, which built that hype. The Glenville, the early stages of the Glenville pipeline, and back when the Big 33 was a really big deal, he was a guy in that, and just but that Army Bowl performance and just the electricity and the dynamic, is he going to play corner? Is he going to play receiver? Just so much excitement there. For me, that's clearly the guy as far as just recruiting excitement.
Yeah, I'm going to go Ginn too. I think Fleming with the rankings probably comes close, especially because getting that win over Penn State, he's in Penn State's backyard. His girlfriend was at Penn State. Everyone's like, oh, this kid's going to Penn State. And then it was like, well, no, he's going to Clemson actually. And for Ohio State and Brian Hartline to win that one, I think is a very, very close second. But the Ted Ginn win, I don't even think, I can't remember a player that electric. He might be the most electric player in Ohio State history. I mean, Curtis Samuel, Chris Gamble playing both ways, but I mean, Ted Ginn, I just got to go with Ted Ginn. And I think a lot of the guys on the roster now, the Emeka Egbukas, the Garrett Wilsons, they could be mentioned in that conversation as well. So a lot of highly rated receivers that Ohio State's brought in the last couple of years are definitely going to be up there, but I'm going to go Ted Ginn. Shifting to tight end. I mean, look, Ohio State, I think they produced actually a lot of good tight ends that have gone on to have nice NFL careers, probably better NFL careers than Ohio State careers. They just don't throw them the ball that much. So the list isn't as long here, but the guy I'm going to go with, a guy both of us saw live in high school multiple times, Jeremy Ruckert. Just Urban Meyer calling him, and obviously it was hyperbole a little bit on signing day and whatnot, but calling him the greatest tight end recruit he's ever seen kind of just seals the deal for me. Louis Irizarry, who could have had an amazing career, but some off-field stuff kind of hindered that, was a close second. But I'm going to go with Ruckert, and I think he's going to be another guy who has a better NFL career than Ohio State career when it comes to the statistics. But who do you got?
Yeah, it's probably Ruckert. Urban kind of going off the deep end a little bit there with the greatest tight end. I mean, and from a guy who really didn't do that stuff a lot with recruits, he almost kind of like to go the opposite and maybe downplay the young guys. But I think Ruckert, because it was kind of a national recruiting battle, and he was a little mysterious. I mean, he was a good kid to work with, but he did keep things kind of tight to the vest there for a while.
Yeah, you had to get him in person pretty much.
Yeah. There was a lot of mystery there. He really kind of, but I would throw out Jake Stoneburner as well. As the Brew Crew was such a big thing. I mean, that was God. I was just on the tail or at the very beginning of starting to kind of do this, and I think I was doing it part-time at the time, kind of covered in Central Ohio, and just the whole buzz around the Brew Crew and those kids at Kaufman that year. I think was actually pretty crazy. I would have Stoneburner right there up at the top as far as just buzz and excitement. Even though I think what hurts Jake is I think most people just assumed he was going to go to Ohio
Yeah,
State.
you're
I
from
just,
Columbus. You're yeah,
so,
but I agree. He's got to be up there, and Marcus Ball probably deserves mention too,
yep.
being from California again, committing without ever visiting. He was like a top 50 recruit at the time. So yeah, that was interesting. Let's finish the offensive side of the ball. Go the O line. Who's your number one O line? And there's been a lot of good ones they've signed. So who's number one for you?
I'm like still like trying to like hash this out. I want to say Mike Adams, to be honest with you. Just because again, we go back to the Brew Crew and he was ridiculously highly ranked. I think Rivals had him like number 3 overall in the country. And that was another guy that was going to be, that was going to be their franchise for 4 years. And did he quite live up to that at Ohio State? Probably not. He had a good career. He probably had a better career than people give him credit for. But that was just that Block O and Brew Crew and just everything else. I think that's probably up there. I think you could. I'm not gonna steal your guy here, but I think Nick Petit-Frere, that's another one. And again, there was mystery there, and that was a national battle. And they had, you had started to realize like, oh gosh, they're gonna, they miss on Jackson Carman. They're not gonna get Rasheed Walker. Like, oh, they better get this one. And so that would be kind of my 1A and 1B, I think.
Yeah, I'd have Petit-Frere up there, and it's funny because I tell this story often, but I found out like way before anyone knew that he was even visiting. Like Greg Schiano was like, I got that one on lock. Like he was like he was very confident because he was his kids went to the same high school and he like volunteered assistant there while he was in between the Buccaneers and the Ohio State jobs. And so he knew the kid really well. And like what I was told was like, if Schiano says go here, like Nick Petit-Frere is going there. And so like we didn't know that until I found that out. I think it was like November, December, something like that. And I started to put that out. But yeah, I mean, I still didn't even believe it at the time. I was like, okay, Greg, like, yeah, sure. Yep, that's okay. But I'm going to go Paris Johnson. I just think that one could have went really, really bad after Urban Meyer stepped down and Ryan Day came in, saved the day, sold Paris, probably more importantly, sold Monica, his mother, and just made them feel comfortable with it and handled that whole situation where Paris was staying as a commit, but looking around, weighing his options. They just handled that so well. And so for that reason, I think plus the ranking, obviously a 5-star guy from Ohio. We saw plenty of those kind of get away from the Buckeyes in the recent years before that. So he's my guy. Let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball. Start with the D-line. This is a tough one. I mean, the Bosas, Chase Young, Jack Sawyer, like so many choices, but I'm going to go Noah Spence. 5-star kid, Ohio State had 0 shot at from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is Penn State country all the way, but LSU, Alabama. I mean, everyone wanted the kid. And Urban Meyer just came in and basically said, yeah, you're coming with me. And so that's in a nutshell why I'm going Noah Spence. Pick your poison here?
I gotta go with Jack. I really, and maybe I shouldn't be weighing this as much as I am, but I look at the list and I'm like, this guy is as can't miss as any of those guys. I think he's going to be as good as any of those guys on that list. And I know he didn't have maybe the drama because he kind of committed a little earlier than maybe we thought he would. He looked like he was maybe going to visit some of the other Big Ten schools and just kind of abruptly ended it after working with Larry Johnson at a camp. But that was all she wrote at that point. But I just think that is, and I think they needed that in this 21 class. I think they needed their next guy. I think they still have depth at the position, but I just think they need that difference maker. The interesting one for me is Adolphus Washington, because that was a huge national battle, and that there's coaching transitions going on during his recruiting process. That was one of the first big post Tressel recruits that they landed. So I think Adolphus is probably worth mentioning as well. And then of course the Bosas. I think the Joey Bosa we now know was not quite he wasn't like a top 5 national guy, at least for most people. I think most people had him, 20s, 30s, 40s. And then of course he blossomed into one of the best players in Ohio State history. But
And then they realized they made that mistake and didn't make the same mistake on Nick.
right, exactly. And then everyone kind of said, "Oh, well, he's only rated high because of Joey, because they messed up on Joey." I'm like, not so much. But
no, because they both should have been top 15 guys.
Exactly. But this list is crazy. I mean, Chase Young. I mean,
how about Zach Harrison? They almost lost Zach Harrison to Michigan.
Zach Harrison was a crazy one. That, I probably should have given that a little more credit just because that was a legitimate battle. And again, another kid who didn't like interviews and things like that. So people were constantly like trying to like figure out where Ohio State was standing, if they were losing ground. And so I'm looking at like some of these guys. I'm like, man, we could talk about 15 guys on this list at this position. This is an interesting group.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go over level back and go to linebackers. Who's your guy in the middle?
Oh gosh, I'm gonna go against my initial instinct, the guy I want to pick, but I think it's Raekwon McMillan. I think I felt he was going to Ohio State pretty much the whole way. I mean, there was maybe a little doubt was cast at certain times, but I remember I went to his announcement in Hinesville, and I get there. I'm not going to throw these people under the bus, but there were a couple of people that from one of the networks there, and they looked at me. And when I walked into I think it was in the library, and they looked at me and they're like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, I think I'm about to cover an Ohio State commitment. Is like what I think I'm doing here. Like, he's not going to Ohio State. I'm like, I think he is, but they thought he was going to Alabama. And so there was a lot of drama there. And then you hear stories later, like, man, if he would have been confident if Kirby Smart was going to stay at Alabama, he might have went to Alabama, but he was more convinced that Fickell would be at Ohio State and then Kirby would be at Alabama. So there's like all sorts of stuff there. A lot to unpack on that one. Drama filled, went the distance pretty much. And then obviously had a great career at Ohio State.
Yeah, that one is up there for me. I had him at 3rd on my list, right behind Mike DeAndrea at number 2, and right in front of Dorian Bell and Curtis Grant. I think all of them could be up there, but Baron Browning for me. I mean, from the state of Texas, Alabama, another one that was probably Alabama or Ohio State. Texas was in the mix. I mean, everyone was in the mix at some point, but that was one with a lot of twists and turns and who's it going to be. And yeah, I mean, Ohio State, that was a big win for them. And, Baron Browning probably didn't, we might blame Billy Davis for this. I don't know. He didn't become the player I think he could have become if he had better coaching maybe earlier in his career. But I thought he finished pretty strong and obviously was a second, third round pick this year, 3rd round pick. So, he's going to probably be a guy who has a better NFL career than he did Ohio State career. But that was at the time, 5-star kid. I think he was a top 10, maybe top 20 at worst kid. And that was a big win for Ohio State. And second to last group, defensive backs. I'm going to stay in the same class. Another Texas kid. I'm going to go Jeff Okudah here. There's a couple on this list. I'll wait to hold the names that I had in high consideration, but Okudah was like a top 10 kid, 5-star from Texas. His mom at the time was sick, I believe, or maybe I can't remember if she passed away by the time he committed or not. But it was just a situation where he clearly picked a school. He made a business decision, and everyone in the country wanted the kid. A lot of people thought he might stay in Texas, but they did a great job on him. Obviously did a great job developing him at Ohio State. And he was the number 3 overall draft pick. Not that matters for this criteria, but he was a massive win for Ohio State. And so just the ranking and going into Texas and plucking him out of there, I go Jeff Okudah. How about you?
Yeah, he's definitely on the short list. And maybe my favorite defensive back they've ever recruited, as far as my opinion of his ability. I thought, definitely one of the best guys I've covered. But I think the Von Bell circus was an all-timer. Again, another kid who didn't talk much, talked a little early, and then the last few months, I was calling coach every week, and I was going through coach because Vaughn was done. But it that got so crazy. Everyone's like, oh, it's Tennessee. I'm like, I don't know. It might not be Tennessee. It might be Ohio State. And then Alabama, makes their push. And, Alabama's recruiting him as a corner. Is that going to influence him in either direction? And, obviously he, basically, pranks Urban Meyer on the morning of his announcement. And, it just nobody knew for sure. I mean, and we say nobody knew for sure. The infamous Bruce Feldman tweet goes out, a couple hours before about something about congratulating or a huge pickup for Tennessee with Von Bell. And, I still to this day would love the backstory on what happened there, but because I don't think Von played a game like that. I think some wires got crossed somewhere along the way, but I just, covering both of those guys, I just feel like there was more suspense and just drama around Von Bell. It just moved the needle so much when I talked about Von Bell.
Agree. Two other guys I'll just throw out that I was considering because Von Bell is up there, but Sean Wade, mom went to Alabama, family in Alabama. I mean, that was a big win for Ohio State, and Kerry Combs. And Damon Webb grew up a Michigan fan from Detroit, Cass Tech. I mean, come on, Mike Weber before Mike Weber, I mean, he started the whole thing. And so to get that win, especially early in the process, people thought maybe LSU would get it over Michigan. Okay, I can understand that. But for Ohio State to win for a lifelong Michigan fan, I think that was a big one. Well, last position group, athlete. There's not as many of these guys that were super highly ranked that were categorized as athletes, but who's your number one in this group?
Yeah, under different criteria, I think I would probably go with the guy who I think you're gonna go with, but I'm gonna say Torrance Gibson. That was, oh, you want to talk about, and before we can talk or not talk about what happened later, but just during his high school process, what a circus. I mean, that was on again, off again. Ohio State was getting him. They were all in on him. Oh, well, we're backing off. The Tennessee incident happens. I mean, just like
Auburn.
Yeah, right. I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna keep pushing on that one. No, then they're back in on him, or because Urban couldn't help himself. But it's too athletic, and he knew he'd be a receiver, and Urban couldn't help himself on receivers. But so that for me, that was one of the bigger circuses I think I've covered. So that's it for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Torrance Gibson as well. The rankings say Curtis Samuel, and I think that was a big because Urban was like looking for his Percy Harvin.
Yeah.
And that was Curtis Samuel. And he kind of became that in that 1 year where he really starred. But like Urban needed that guy. And so that's when I did the list between the ranking going into Brooklyn, New York, of all places. And just because they needed a guy who could play that position, I went with Curtis Samuel. But I think Torrance, from like a hype and just what he could have been standpoint, I think Torrance gets it. And I'll give honorable mention to Dontre Wilson, just from Texas, Oregon. It was going to be Oregon. Like that was, I mean, people got excited. They thought maybe he was going to be the Percy Harvin type of guy, but that's where we end. But yeah, Torrance Gibson is a good place to end for sure. This was fun.
Good place to start
definitely check out, and I'll link to it in the story when we post it, but definitely go to Buckeye Scoop when you guys listen to this. And I'll put both the offense and the defense and athletes in there, and take a look and let us know in the comments and stuff like that, who you guys think and girls think are your kind of number one recruiting wins for Ohio State at each of the positions. Mark, thanks for joining. Always a pleasure. Always appreciate it. And definitely have to get you back on soon.
Sounds good.
This episode of Around the Oval was brought to you by Todd Pennington with Renovation Mortgage. If you've been thinking about refinancing or buying a house, check out our sponsor, Todd Pennington with Renovation Mortgage. They offer low rates for refinancing and home purchase loans, including first-time home buyer programs, down payment assistance, and cash-out home equity loans. check out revolutionmortgage.com/tpennington.